Then Jesus came from Galilee to the Jordan to be baptized by John. But John tried to deter him, saying, "I need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me?" Jesus replied, "Let it be so now. It is proper for us to do this to fulfill all righteousness." And John consented. As soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water. At that moment, the heaven was opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending on him like a dove and lighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, with whom I love and with whom I am well pleased." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So in November of 2017, I was baptized in the Jordan River. Now, we're not going to get into debates about rebaptism this morning, but when in Israel, one gets baptized in the Jordan River. It was the same river that Jesus was baptized in. I made my way to the Jordan from a tour bus, trading my token for a towel and a white robe, and walking through one of those metal rolly things that you walk through, just as many hundreds of people were going to do that same day. And so I changed into my suit and my white robe, and I carefully scaled down the jagged, slippery rocks, grasping the hand of my sister, who was in front of me, and my mother, who was behind me. And we must have been breathing, but I don't really remember that. I don't remember the other people who were there. I don't remember much about the scenery. But I do remember the moment I stepped into the freezing cold water. Yeah, it was cold. It was cold. We were sort of clumsy, us three ladies, wading through this perfect mikvah of running water, the same running water that the Israelites had crossed in the book of Joshua to claim the land that God had given to them. I mean, it's just not something that you can describe or forget. I was also privileged to do baptisms in the Jordan River. And so I first dipped my sister in the water and raised her up dripping wet and freezing cold, her teeth chattering together. And I baptized her in the name of the Father and the Son and in the Holy Spirit. And then my mom, Alisanne Ray Ells, I baptize you in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And now all three of us were soaked to our pores as the heavens opened up and the Spirit of God descended on us. We felt so small and yet simultaneously aware of the intense power of God that was coursing through our chilled veins together that morning. When Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River, it was John who pulled him up out of the water, dripping wet and shivering cold in the waters of the Jordan, and the heavens opened, and the Spirit of God descended on them and alighted on them like a dove. And perhaps you already made a connection with the Genesis reading, when a dove flies into the presence of Noah, signaling a turn, a change, a renewal. What must that have been like for Noah? Like 40 days and 40 nights, rocking and rolling in the waves, that were probably taller than houses, listening to the clamoring torrential rainpour on the wooden outline of the ark, wondering and waiting and hoping for the terrifying flood to calm down? Even before the flood, the world was ruined, the scriptures say, that all flesh was corrupted, every thought people had was evil, the earth was filled with violence. So much so that the good God had created had disintegrated until it was worse than the very worst, darker than the darkest alley, a hideous stain of wretchedness that angered God so much, it says he regretted making it at all. God regretted making it at all? Ooh. Imagine how weary and hopeless and heavy it was for Noah and his family. What they felt as their ark drifted across those waters with harsh and swirling waves on top of everything they had ever known. Was this the end? And then a single dove returns to them with an olive branch in its beak, green and living, a sign that this wasn't the end. The relief that filled Noah's lungs, I imagine it felt like that first gasp of air my mom and my sister and I got when we burst out of the cold waters of the Jordan River, a moment we wanted to yell, "Woohoo!" Seeing that dove in that moment for Noah, it was tangible evidence that God had not forgotten Noah. Tangible evidence God had not forgotten Noah and his family. There was life out there. New life. There were growing things. There was a safe, solid place to start over. I sure could use a safe, solid place to start over. Maybe you could too. When we talk about baptism, we often are celebrating. We're talking about the good, cheerful parts of it. We're marked as Christ owns forever. We're washed clean. We're made free. We're beloved. We're sealed with the power of the Holy Spirit. And that's all great and beautiful and wonderful. But there's a flood too. There's a flood too. The drowning in the muck of it all, in and all around us, running so hard and so rampant. And the message of baptism, too, is that sometimes we need God to help us with our restart, to deliver us with a sign that the struggle of today isn't the end tomorrow. Just think about all the things that overwhelm people, that crush us, and leave us gasping for breath under the cold water. Financial ruin, a diagnosis that goes from bad to worse, sexual assault, remorse for a mistake we've made but can't fix, addiction, anger, grief. So many things are flooding what looks familiar to us, flooding our minds and overwhelming us. And one of my favorite Christian authors is Anne Lamott. I first read one of her books when I was in college. And her raw honesty about the highs and lows of following Jesus enraptured me. In that book, I met her only son, Sam, who in the book I was reading at that time was just a little tyke, toddling around, wreaking havoc. Well, Sam is now an adult. Actually, he's around my age. And Sam shares openly about his struggles that he's encountered in his lifetime: addiction, brain health, all kinds of things. And some years ago, he shared a post on his blog called "How I Managed Not to Kill Myself Yesterday." And he began by just naming the pain of the holiday season. It was around that time of year. You know, this onslaught of commercialism and happiness that were a painful reminder of the things that he wasn't feeling, the objects he didn't have and couldn't afford, the missing pieces of love and happiness that he wasn't experiencing. And he said, for me, it was an exercise in endurance and grit. And he found himself exhausted, sharing that a few days earlier from when he was writing this post, he had called a suicide prevention hotline. And it was something he was embarrassed about, ashamed to admit. He said, all these thoughts are so confusing, they don't match up with really the wonderful life I actually have in front of me, and I felt guilty that I didn't have the strength to call anybody in my normal, regular circle of support to talk about it. He was drowning. And then the heavens opened up, and the Spirit of God descended on him like a dove. Now, Sam didn't call it that. I'm calling it that. I'm calling it that. How the folks on the other end of that suicide prevention hotline listened to Sam and helped him see that it wasn't the end, that there was an olive branch out there, a sign of new life, a reason to live, and a safe place to start over. And Sam wasn't alone in his experience of that dove power, the heaven opening up, and the feeling of safety and new life. I'm sure there are those of you who could share your own moments where God has seemed to sweep in out of nowhere with the olive branch, where the Spirit shows up like a dove and alights on you. I like to call these moments of dove power. We've got some doves hanging back here. Dove power. When the wild waters of terror and pain, the floods of emotion and thundering showers of grief and disease get replaced, booted out, kicked to the curb, or at least start to, where they start to dry up and we begin to feel that there's something there. Dove moments like a well-timed offer of help, a story that inspires us, a delicious meal. Dove power moments when hope is rekindled and raw energy pulses through us, when something strikes us as funny for the first time in a while. These moments happen to us so that we too can remember God is going to take care of us. God is faithful. The world is still beautiful. And friends, the waters of baptism remind us there is life out there.